The point of view switches back to the double dungeon where the hunters are struggling against the architect. He says, "You're quite amusing indeed. Try a bit harder to break free from my design, why don't you?" Chahae, determined to wake Sung Jinwoo up, unleashes her famous sword dance. Amused, the architect says, "There you go, just like that," and manages to block all her attacks with one sword while slashing her in the shoulder with the other. Laughing, he says, "Is that all you got? Well, I guess there won't be any deviations after all. You humans never fail to disappoint. The system I built can predict and respond to any outcome. Such feeble attempts will never kill my creation. I suppose this is the best you can do." The architect is suddenly hit with the blast on the side of his head mid-yap sesh. Choi Jong was the one who fired the blast, and he said, "We must wake up Sung Jinwoo. It's the only way to defeat him." Although still injured, almost instinctively, Chahae dashes towards Sung Jinwoo. The architect again intercepts her and blocks her path, while also drawing a literal line in the sand. "So you managed to dodge my attack, huh? Not bad." All of a sudden, the architect notices something he didn't see before. Attached to the end of Chahae's shoulder is a shadow. He says the rules of this room don't allow for such scenes to come forth, but without a doubt that is a shadow. "You think the king planted one of his soldiers on you? How did you all find this place? What is your relationship to Sung Jinwoo?" Chahae responds, "We're his friends and we're here to rescue him." The architect smiles and said, "Perhaps it wasn't the king's doing, but alright, I'll give you a chance. Today, one of the great monarchs will descend upon this world, and I'm going to give you a chance to witness this glorious event. However, all of your little human friends will die right here, right now." Just as he's about to make his move, he hears someone from behind him say, "Not on my watch." Before he even has a chance to turn around and see who's speaking, a fist slams into his jaw and shatters it completely. Of course, that fist belonging to none other than Sung Jinwoo. Enraged, Sung Jinwoo says, "What have you done to my body?" Mr. Woo is just staring mouth wide open in shock. Choi Jong and Chahae are just relieved because now Sung Jinwoo is here to save the day. Sung Jinwoo uses the king's authority to slam the monarch on the ground, and he stands on him with his foot on his chest looking down. The architect says, "It seems you're not the king, but why? Why are you here instead of him? How are you able to maintain consciousness even with that black heart?" As he says black heart, you hear the ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum of the heart beating. And Wu says, "Black heart, huh? So this is where that crazy amount of mana came from." The system sends a message explaining what's going on. Title, Demon Hunter. You have met all the requirements. You have recalled your defeat of the Demon King Baran, the monarch of the White Flames. An incredible power has acknowledged the player and its master. Effect, Black Heart. Plus 100,000 mana. And we're shown Jinwoo's now permanently purple eyes reading the message. Thinks to himself, judging by his reaction, I can deduce two things. The Black Heart isn't a product of this guy's grand scheme, and also it was never meant to strengthen my powers. The retrieved data didn't give me all the answers. I haven't heard the full story yet. Out loud, he says, "You said you were against choosing me as a player. But what exactly is a player? And what were you trying to do to me?" Architect says, "Could it be?" And now visibly enraged, he says, "Monarch of Shadows, how could you do this to us? Think the other monarchs will let you get away with this?" Point of view pans to Sung Jinwoo. We see multiple swords materializing out of thin air. Swords point themselves at the architect, who was fearing for his life, and Sung Jinwoo says, "Just answer my questions." While laughing, the architect says, "You're an unpredictable one, aren't you? I think I understand now why you were chosen." The point of view pans to the hunters, who are now starting to freak out because the stone statues are reanimating again. Even the ones that were still before are now coming to life. Stone statues have created a circle around the hunters, and now the architect is saying, "If I die, then no one will be able to stop my puppets. You still think you can kill me?" Sung Jinwoo with murderous intent says, "What if I killed you and managed to defeat your puppets as well?" He responds, "I'm the architect of this system. If you were to kill me..." Sung Jinwoo finishes his sentence by saying, "I'd return to being an E-rank hunter? See, I thought about that, but an existing system doesn't fall apart when its creator vanishes now, does it?" The architect begins panicking as Sung Jinwoo just called his bluff. Suddenly, the system notifications begin to go haywire as the architect tries to override it. But at this point, the system has evolved beyond his control and is denying the administrators access. The architect asks himself, "Why is the system denying me?" Jinwoo says, "You know, I once thought to myself," and then there's a pause. Shown a montage of all the times Sung Jinwoo's questioned whether or not he's being used by the system, and all the times he decided to also use the system as well. Then he says, "I will swallow the system whole. But lucky for me, it seems your design is full of flaws." The architect yells, "How dare you!" Before he can finish his yap session, Sung Jinwoo completely eviscerates him. And as he's crumbled to dust, he offers his last words, "Let me make a prediction, no, a prophecy. When the pillars of fire supporting the skies are erected, an unavoidable death will come and find you." Jinwoo thinks about it for a second, and then he replies, "So be it." Point of view switches to the hunters waiting outside the double dungeon. One of them says it's already been over an hour since the Hunters Guild went inside. What's taking them so long? Apparently more guilds have pulled up since Mr. Wu's team went in, because another one says if our guild went in instead, we would have been totally screwed. Suddenly we see Mr. Wu's team begin to come out of the gate. Everyone's severely injured with extremely low morale. I can't believe the elite members of the Hunters Guild look so beat up. What in the world happened inside that C-rank gate? Mr. Wu says, you guys are from the Courage Guild, right? Can you help us transport all our casualties? The Courage Guild member says, yes, of course. Last person to walk out the gate was Jinwoo, still contemplating everything that just transpired. The real architect is probably somewhere else, he thought. I got some answers, but not all. I don't think he would have stuck around long enough to tell me everything anyways. Mr. Wu reports that 20 of the highest ranking hunters died in action. That being said, they would have suffered unimaginable damage had the dungeon break occurred. He asked Mr. Wu, you're telling me you attempted to clear this double dungeon all by yourself? Jinwoo thinks to himself, I asked the Courage Guild to report the double dungeon, but I didn't think anyone would actually show up. I'm the reason these hunters died today. He's thinking this while looking down at the bodies of all the hunters that didn't make it out. He says to Mr. Wu, I survived thanks to the Hunters Guild and the surveillance team. Mr. Wu says the surveillance team is always notified when an S rank takes action. The decision to ask the Hunters Guild for their cooperation was mine, although the results were quite tragic this time around. He turns his curiosity to Jinwoo. How did you know that there was a double dungeon here? Jinwoo responds candidly, the dungeon called out to me. And Mr. Wu was like, called out? What do you mean? He says, I received a message telling me to come here. And Mr. Wu asks to look at that message, and Jinwoo says it's something that only I can see. Mr. Wu thinks to himself, I doubt he's joking considering how many deaths there's been. I just can't get a read on this guy. Tae-in approaches Jinwoo and asks him if he's alright, to which he responds, yeah, I'm good. And suddenly he starts to feel a little bit wobbly, and he's like, wait, maybe I'm not good? Now that I think about it, I am kind of tired, he thinks to himself as he slowly loses consciousness and falls to the ground. Mr. Wu managed to catch him before he could hit the ground and summoned the healing team to help him out. Point of view switches to Japan, where they're preparing for the Red Gate dungeon break. Yuri requested they gathered as many mana crystals as they could and planted them in various places in the city under the gate. Yuri says 200,000 tons of mana crystals. This should be more than enough for the magic circle. Once I build a barrier around the gate, it'll start drawing in mana from the crystals. At that point, the magic circle will be self-sufficient. Then suddenly catches Yuri's attention. He says, how strange. The Japanese assistant assigned to him asks if there's a problem. He says, no, the barrier is perfect. However, sense an unknown presence nearby, he says, now looking suspicious with his eyes glowing. At this point, the Japanese assistant is confused because Yuri is yelling out, who are you? Show yourself. He waits for an answer or response but receives none. And the assistant says, would someone really have the guts to be out here in the streets when the dungeon break is tomorrow? Mr. Yuri said, I never said it was a person. And now the assistant is even more confused than ever. In the next panel, if you look very, very closely, there is a dark figure standing on top of a building like Batman. One of you pans the said figure and he says, a man with sharp senses. Well, I guess there's nothing strange about that considering where his power comes from. Closer point of view reveals this to be Sung Il-wan, Jinwoo's father, and he says, regardless, it finally begins. Everything seems to be going according to plan, which means tragedy is afoot. The point of view switches to 3 nearby S-rankers who are assessing their situation. At this point, they've called every available hunter and the army for the worst case scenario. The lady hunter says modern firearms are highly ineffective against beasts, so I just don't see the point in mobilizing an army. The male hunter replies, if your Orloff's strategy fails, someone needs to buy the frontline hunters some time to prepare for an attack. He responds, so they're just human shields pretty much. He says, as long as we're stationed at the front lines, we hunters are no different. It just goes to show how helpless humans are in the face of pure destruction. Point of view switches back to Yuri Orloff. He says, perfect, this is great. If all goes well, I'll have this gate taken care of all by myself. It would be great if I could be known as the man who single-handedly brought down an S-rank gate. But there's another hunter who fits that title better, and I shouldn't be so overambitious. He says he takes a swig of his alcohol. The Japanese representative chastises him about drinking alcohol, but he says, I'm just trying to calm the nerves. I'm also about to put on the greatest show you've ever seen, so this calls for a toast. He asks how many S-ranks are on standby, to which the representative responds, there are 15 in total. Quite a small audience, huh? What are the Americans doing? Did they not send Japan any S-rank hunters? And the rep responds, well, an S-rank gate has spawned on their soil as well in the state of Maryland to be exact. That's not all. S-rank gates have spawned in the United Kingdom, India, and many more nations besides Japan. He responds, I see. So countries all over the world are suffering from a shortage of good hunters. The representative notices something's happening at the gate and the conversation is brought to a complete halt. Loud and ominous chatter just alerted the city that the gate is finally opened. Point of view switches to Jinwoo, who just woke up in the middle of a hospital. He's still very dazed and confused, but Jinho explains that he's been knocked out for 3 days. Jinwoo ponders to himself, 3 whole days? Did I really build up that much fatigue? Well, I guess I haven't taken a break in a while. But more importantly, I keep thinking about the war the architect guy showed me. I can't get it out of my head. Wait, hold on. I've been asleep for 3 whole days. Then that means... Jinho, give me an update, he says out loud. Jinho's like, an update on what? S-rank gate in Japan. What happened to it? And Jinho's kind of like, oh, yikes. Well, one of you switches to a flashback of what must have occurred over the 3 days he was asleep. The red gate just broke and both the Army and Japanese Hunters Association are standing in complete and utter shock. An army of giants had just began walking through the gate. Frightened, one of the hunters says, but they usually appear as bosses of only the highest level of A-rank gates. Why are they here and why are there so many? Yuri scoffs at the sight of the giants and says, this will be easy peasy. Bro really said easy peasy, those are his words, not mine. With a glowing green hand, he yells, come at me. Then we're shown him pulling mana from the crystal to create this shield that he's so famous for. We're shown the red gate going from being wide open to completely encapsulated by Yuri's abilities. Axe in hand, one of the giants begins attacking the shield. And Yuri starts laughing. He says, beasts that are commonly found in a measly A-rank gate. Who would have thought? Pipsqueaks think you can break through my barrier? And suddenly an even larger hand grabs the head of the giant who's trying to smash through the barrier. Yuri's cockiness quickly turns to petrified fear. An even bigger giant throws the giant who was trying to break through the barrier by the face, and using an obnoxiously long sword, slices through Yuri's barrier in one swing. For the first time since we were introduced to Yuri, he's at a complete loss for words. The point of view switches back to Sung Jinwoo in the hospital, who just found out that the raid in Japan was a failure. The point of view then switches again to Yo Myugyeon, I think I said that right, Jinho's father, sleeping at his desk. He wakes up and after realizing he dozed off, asks his assistant how long he was asleep for which he responds, for 23 hours and 46 minutes, sir. You ordered me to take you to the hospital if you didn't wake up in 24 hours, so I was just about to get the car ready. There are 2 recent developments that I must inform you all. First and foremost, there is a patient who was woken up from an eternal slumber, and that person just happens to be Sung Jinwoo's mother. Mr. Yo thinks to himself, does that mean he has the power to cure eternal slumber? Then he says, alright, what's the other piece of news? He opens the door and says, and second, you have a visitor. The visitor is a woman we haven't met before, and before the point of view switches, she says, how long have you known? Side note, I'm assuming this is Jinho's sister, but we'll see. The point of view switches to Japan where Yuri's being dropped from a giant hand and into a giant mouth. Yep, that's right, Yuri was just swallowed whole, pause. The military has sprung into action alongside the hunters, but it doesn't seem to be having an effect as the giants are just eating these artillery fires. Nevertheless, they are giving it everything they've got. They have air support, they have tanks, they have ground units. The point of view switches to Reiji telling the hunters that these weapons will not work against beasts and it's time to get active. The 2 S ranks under his command spring into action and attack a nearby giant. The lady hunter thinks that if she can gouge out its eyes, it won't be able to read their moves. But the giant effortlessly dodges her attacks and swings his massive sword at her. She's shocked at how fast and agile these giants are despite being so large. Way up high in the sky, there's a news helicopter filming and reporting on what's going on in Tokyo. The point of view switches to Sung Jinwoo, who is watching the live feed. The broadcaster is saying that even from this distance we can see that the city is in ruin, and this is probably what hell on earth looks like. Whether this crisis can be contained by the hunters remains to be seen. Jinwoo thinks to himself, at this rate, this gate could put all of Asia at risk just like the one in Jeju Island did. I have to get moving. Just as he's about to get up, he hears a don't go from behind him, and of course it's his sister. She says, don't go, Jinwoo. He says, what do you mean? She says, I know you're gonna go there. He gets up casually and says, no, I'm not. I've overworked myself lately and I plan on taking a long break. He pats her on the head, tells her not to worry, and goes on his way. The point of view switches to Sung Jinwoo sitting alone in a park. His eyes glow purple and he says, Biru? And Biru answers, yes, my majesty, I mean, my king. He says, I told you to watch over Jinna. Have you been watching period dramas again? It's really obvious. You can tell Biru feels like really bad he's being chastised. He changes the subject and says, anyways, how has she been? And Biru says, she doesn't do much besides sleep, my king. And Jinwoo thinks to himself, she must be traumatized. With the exception of my first raid 4 years ago, she's never tried to stop me from leaving. What should I do? Now walking, a car slowly pulls up behind Sung Jinwoo. Stops in front of him, rolls the windows down, and the point of view changes again. He says, Chairman Yo, what business do you have with me? He replies, hello, Mr. Sung. As you already know, I am Yo Ming-Wan, the chairman of the Yujin Construction Agency. He slowly slides a blank check across his desk over to Sung Jinwoo. He says, I'm not some arrogant rich guy who thinks everything can be bought with money, especially when dealing with an S-rank hunter. So please think of this as a simple gesture of my sincerity. Jinwoo pauses and thinks about it for a second. I get it. He's basically saying that what we're about to discuss can't leave the room. I don't think he's here to get me to join the guild though. Then he says out loud, what exactly do you want to buy from me? Mr. Yo pauses for a second. Well, to be honest, I suffer from the same illness as your mother. Does Jinho know about this? Sung Jinwoo asks. Aside from my doctor, only my wife and secretary knows, which makes 3 in total. So I guess that makes me the 4th. Indeed, Mr. Yo says. While searching tirelessly for a cure, I discovered the one and only person to ever be freed from this affliction. And I don't think it's just a coincidence that this individual happens to be your mother. What I want from you, Mr. Sung, is the truth, and if you were to help me out, I swear to never forget your kindness. Jinwoo pauses for a second, looking a little bit frustrated. He thinks to himself, today I keep feeling like I'm being forced into a decision. The point of view switches back to Japan, where we see Tokyo completely set ablaze. The reporters in the helicopter are still broadcasting what they're seeing, and what they're seeing is pure carnage. This is devastating, the cameraman says. The beasts are destroying buildings and rooting out trees. It's like they're trying to wipe out all traces of human existence. And to make matters worse, they eat humans too. His companion starts to get worried and he says, don't worry, based on a number of observational reports, we're safe as long as we don't attack first and stay far out of reach. The real problem is that big guy over there, referring to the colossal giant. The other giants have dispersed, but the largest of them is still standing guard in front of the gate. Is it guarding the gate or is it waiting for someone? The other reporter says, my guess is as good as yours. This is just my professional opinion, but I have a feeling that thing isn't alive. Sure, it's breathing and moving, but I feel like its movements are robotic, like they've been programmed. A robot? I wish. At least then we'd be able to shoot them down. Of the 30 beasts that came out that gate, only 2 have been killed. How many days has it been since the dungeon break again? It's been 2 days, the cameraman answers. I wonder if we'll be able to contain this situation before all of Japan is razed to the ground. We're shown a picture of a skyscraper in flames from top to bottom. The point of view switches to the Ajin Guild headquarters. You're going to Japan, Jinho says. Haven't you seen the news? The Jeju Island raid doesn't even compare. I've never seen such massive magic beasts in my life, sir. Jinwoo replies, if I succeed, people around the world will recognize the name of our guild. This makes Jinho hesitate. Jinwoo thinks to himself, usually Jinho has faith in me and goes along with whatever I decide, but this time, he's worried. Well, the damage did look serious, referring to his condition after he came back from the double dungeon. Jinho says, alright then, this time, I'm coming with you. The Red Gate accident, the Jeju Island raid, and most recently, the double dungeon incident. Do you know what all these events have in common? Jinwoo says, beats me. Now crying emphatically, Jinho says, it's that I was nowhere to be seen. And he raises a scrapbook of all the times Sung Jinwoo was mentioned in the newspaper. The only thing I can proudly show off is the fact that I've been by your side. I'm embarrassed to say this, but you give me bragging rights. Jinwoo casually says, I didn't expect to hear that from the son of a business tycoon. So I want to follow you wherever you go. Please take me with you. Jinwoo says, just a second ago, you told me not to go. You do remember where I said I'm going, right? Jinho says, I trust you, sir. I know I'll be safe as long as you're there. This catches Sung Jinwoo off guard. He takes a deep breath, sighs, gets up to leave and says, I was just messing with you. Why would I go to Japan at a time like this? And Jinho's like, wait, what? You can head home now. Good work today. Jinwoo says as he walks out the door. And Jinho is left with an upset expression on his face. Now walking home, Jinwoo was lost in a deep train of thought. I couldn't use my shadow soldiers, but the architect was about as strong as me, even though I'm over level 100, which means there's still lords of other more powerful creatures out there. It's a big world, of course there are beings that are stronger than me. As he walks into his home, he finishes his thought by thinking, I should stop thinking that I'm the only one who can take care of a situation. It's not like I'm a hero. I'm home, he says. Almost instantly, his mom peeks her head around the corner and says, Jinwoo, you haven't had dinner yet, right? Now having dinner with his mom, Jinwoo is still deep in thought while having a conversation with her. In his head, he's thinking, I need to decide. I have to make a decision. But in conversation, he's asking about his sister, how she's doing. And also, why isn't she at dinner? To which his mother responds, she said she's not hungry. We get a brief flashback at the end of his conversation with Mr. Yo. He passes the blank check back over and says, I'm sorry, I'm afraid I can't help you. Mr. Yo says, then how did your mother make a full recovery? Jinwoo says, Chairman Yo, if I knew the cure and I wanted to profit off it, why would I have kept my mouth shut this whole time? Mr. Yo pauses for a second before accepting his reality. He says, I understand what you're saying, and Sung Jinwoo bids him farewell. Alone in the elevator, Sung Jinwoo breathes a sigh of relief. He says he's Jinho's father. Maybe I should have been honest. Then again, I don't know him very well, and there's no telling what kind of person he is or what he has planned up his sleeve. He might have even been lying about being sick. Holy water of life, there's only so much left. I must use it wisely. The offer was tempting, but I didn't feel convinced. If I had to choose to decide right now between all the options in front of me, I'd choose. Who pauses again and then he says, Mom, I have to go. He thinks to himself, there are plenty of people who are still stronger than me, but even so, as long as I'm capable of leveling up, I need to go all out on the battlefield and grow more powerful. Jinwoo's mom says, your father was the same, you know. He'd leave in the middle of a meal whenever he got an emergency call about a fire. I'll help you pack after dinner, she says as the point of view changes to Jinna's room. Although she's snuggled up deep under her blanket, she is very much awake. That night, Jinwoo pops in her room and says, hey, are you sleeping, Jinna? She says, yeah, of course, meaning she wasn't. And he says, can we talk for a second? She says, I have to sleep. Ignoring her, he comes in and sits on her bed thinking to himself, where do I even begin? And he says, I almost died recently. He pauses for a second to give her a chance to respond, looks at her, and she obviously isn't. He says, wait, no, that's not, so I had a lot of near-death experiences, but this time, I really thought I was gonna die. It was a pretty dangerous situation. Anyways, I managed to make it back alive, and I feel grateful each time I return home. So I'm gonna make it back this time too. He says thanks as he pats her head, and we see the point of view of her face, and she has tears in her eyes. She's holding them back. He says, thanks for not asking me to stay all these years. So yeah, I'll be back. Don't worry, I'll protect you no matter how far I am, he says as the shadows slowly rise around him. The point of view then switches to a montage of a press conference being hosted by the Hunters Association of Korea. Mr. Ho is at the podium, most likely giving an announcement that they will be joining in on what's going on in Japan. The room is filled with reporters and broadcasters, so this is being broadcasted across the country, maybe across the continent. He calls Jinwoo up to the stand and he comes in his place. Jinwoo gives some sort of speech, most likely announcing how he's going to go fight as hard as he can to save the people of Japan. There's a roar of applause as we see Sung Jinwoo shaking Gung Go Hee's hand and they're both smiling. The point of view then switches to the airport where Sung Jinwoo is getting ready to board his flight to Japan. We see Jinho making his way through the airport with a mountain of armor and luggage. He catches Jinwoo's attention and they make eye contact for a brief second. Jinho stares back intently. He is not bullshitting. Sung Jinwoo scratches his head and sighs, and it was obvious that this was not planned. I think he totally intended on going without Jinho, and Jinho said, nah, you're taking me, sir. Jinwoo shakes his head, smiles, gives Jinho a hand with his luggage, and Jinho is still kind of pissed that he was about to get left, but I think he's feeling a little bit better now. Also shown both of their badges. The first one says Sung Jinwoo, S rank, Master of the Ajin Guild. The second one says Yo Jinho, D rank, Vice Guild Master of the Ajin Guild, signifying that the Ajin Guild is now official and public.